In 1609, Galileo turned a telescope toward the night sky and saw something that unsettled Europe. The moon, long thought to be a perfect celestial sphere, was scarred with craters and mountains. For centuries, people had imagined the heavens as flawless and unchanging. In a moment, that certainty collapsed. The universe was larger, stranger, and more mysterious than anyone had dared to believe. And yet, instead of despair, it sparked an age of wonder. People realized the world was not finished. It was waiting to be explored. Science fiction carries that same spark. It thrives on the sense that humanity is never at its limit. Even when reality seems narrow, imagination stretches further. The genre thrives not by predicting gadgets, but by reminding us that new horizons are possible. It is less about escape than preparation, a rehearsal of futures that might come to pass. Today we will explore how science fiction uplifts humanity. We will consider its power to inspire vision, to warn of dangers, to encourage courage, and to connect generations through stories of what might yet be. At its best, science fiction is not fantasy but a civic act, expanding what we believe to be within reach. Let's begin. Before we dive in, a quick reminder to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps this channel keep going, and it ensures these conversations reach more people who care about the future. Science fiction uplifts because it reshapes the imagination of possibility. It takes what feels permanent and reminds us that permanence is often temporary. In the early 20th century, the idea of traveling to the moon was written off as a parlor trick. Then Jules Verne and H.G. Wells put it into print, describing machinery and voyages with such detail that the impossible began to feel inevitable. A boy who read those books in 1920 could live long enough to watch Apollo 11 in 1969. That is not a coincidence. The genre's strength lies in how it reframes limitations. A locked door can be seen as a wall or as a challenge to the locksmith. Science fiction teaches the second view. It depicts barriers as temporary, and audiences learn to carry that spirit into real life. That is why so many scientists, engineers, and astronauts trace their careers to a story they once read. At the same time, science fiction is more than inspiration for inventors. It is civic training for ordinary readers. By painting vivid pictures of futures, some bright, some catastrophic, it forces societies to confront questions early. Nuclear war was once theory, but after writers illustrated its shadow, people could visualize the stakes before the first mushroom cloud appeared on film. That visualization created urgency. In short, science fiction uplifts because it strengthens the imagination's grip on reality. It equips both dreamers and citizens with the ability to believe in more than what is at hand. Science fiction uplifts by preserving hope during periods of decline. When daily life feels stagnant, stories about distant futures insist that decline is not destiny. Consider the Great Depression, when unemployment and despair dominated. It was during that decade that pulp magazines thrived. Readers paid a dime to follow stories of interplanetary voyages, cosmic struggles, and bold new civilizations. These were not distractions, they were lifelines. For many, the point was not whether ray guns or Martians would turn out to be real. The point was that the horizon was bigger than the breadline. Even if a man could not find work in 1933, he could still sit by the stove, read of rocket pilots, and remember that human beings were more than their circumstances. Stories gave him something his environment could not: perspective. This function is rarely acknowledged, but deeply important. Societies do not survive on material comfort alone. They need symbols of possibility, reminders that despair is not the final word. Science fiction supplies those symbols. By presenting humanity as a species with a future, it counters the idea that history is nothing but a trap. This is why the genre flourishes in unsettled times. During the Cold War, with its threats of annihilation, writers offered tales of interstellar diplomacy, artificial intelligence, and colonized worlds. The implicit message was that there would be a tomorrow. Fear alone might paralyze, but stories offer motion. In that way, science fiction uplifts not by promising utopia, but by refusing to concede to despair. It reminds us that the story continues. And that reminder has carried many through dark decades when the present felt too heavy to bear. Science fiction also uplifts by warning with clarity. A hopeful vision matters, but so does a well-crafted warning. When Mary Shelley described Frankenstein, she was not inventing lightning or laboratories. She was warning about ambition without conscience. Later writers applied the same instinct to nuclear power, genetic engineering, and artificial intelligence. Warnings may not prevent mistakes, but they prepare societies to handle them. Readers who grew up on dystopian fiction often approach new technologies with sharper questions. A novel about surveillance teaches the civic value of privacy more effectively than a lecture. A story about ecological collapse impresses its lesson more deeply than a policy paper. In this sense, science fiction is a mirror that reflects both what we could achieve and what we could destroy. There is a civic generosity in that act. By imagining the worst, writers spare others from walking blind into it. The uplift here is subtle but real. Science fiction strengthens the public's ability to anticipate. That anticipation does not always yield perfect choices, but it improves the odds of survival. Some critics dismiss science fiction as pessimistic when it warns too starkly, yet those warnings are part of its gift. To uplift does not always mean to comfort. Sometimes it means to equip, even to unsettle, so that when real crises arrive, the population has already rehearsed the conversation. The fact that terms like cyberpunk or post-apocalyptic have entered public vocabulary shows that people are more prepared than they realize. Science fiction uplifts then by ensuring that hope is not blind and courage is not reckless. It tempers aspiration with foresight. Another way science fiction uplifts humanity is by cultivating courage. Imagination alone is not enough. At some point, someone must act. Science fiction models courage in its characters and themes, showing readers how ordinary people step into extraordinary roles. The boy who reads about a reluctant hero confronting alien odds absorbs a lesson about bravery he may later apply in more earthly settings. This effect is not limited to childhood. Adults who face political, social, or technological upheaval often lean on the narrative frameworks they know best. A man who grew up reading about colonists forging lives on harsh new worlds may find himself steadier when his own economy falters. A woman who once thrilled to tales of explorers confronting the unknown may find more resolve when her family faces hardship. Courage is not taught by slogans. It is taught by stories that show what it looks like in practice. Science fiction provides a wealth of those stories, and while the costumes and settings may be fanciful, the underlying lessons are serious. At the civic level, this matters. Societies need citizens who are not paralyzed by fear. They need people willing to risk reputation, comfort, or certainty for the sake of higher goods. Science fiction uplifts by rehearsing those virtues in 1,000 different guises. Readers learn that cowardice leads to ruin, while courage, even if it fails, preserves dignity. In that way, science fiction functions as moral training disguised as entertainment. It gives people courage by making them live it in imagination first, so they are less surprised when reality calls for it. Finally, science fiction uplifts humanity by linking generations through a shared conversation about the future. Each era inherits the visions of the one before it, and those visions evolve. The pulp rockets of the 1930s gave way to the sleek starships of the 1960s, and now to the nuanced explorations of artificial intelligence and transhumanism. Each stage reflects the concerns of its time, but together they form a chain of continuity. That continuity matters because it prevents societies from living entirely in the present. When a grandfather and his granddaughter can both talk about space travel, one recalling how it was once fantasy, the other seeing it as tomorrow's career, the conversation itself is uplifting. It means people are not confined to the narrow span of their own years. They are part of a larger project, a story that began before them and will continue after them. This is not escapism, it is civic memory. A culture that talks about the future is less likely to lose faith in it. When families, classrooms, and communities carry forward the language of science fiction, they keep alive the conviction that humanity is capable of more. And so, by inspiring vision, preserving hope, offering warnings, and modeling courage, Science fiction creates a legacy of uplift that transcends decades. It ensures that humanity's story is never frozen in the present moment, but always reaching beyond it. That brings us to the final reflection. Science fiction uplifts humanity not by predicting every detail, but by enlarging the human spirit. It shows us what it means to reach for more than survival, to think beyond what is at hand, and to carry the story forward even when the present feels heavy. From Galileo's telescope to the paperbacks on a child's nightstand, the pattern is the same. We see something new, we marvel, and then we dare to imagine what comes next. That act of imagination is not frivolous, it is the seed of everything worth building. The lesson of science fiction is that humanity is unfinished. We are always at the beginning of something, never the end. To believe that is already to live with greater courage and greater dignity. That belief uplifts not only the dreamers, but also the ordinary citizens who carry their societies through crisis and into renewal. If you found this reflection worthwhile, I invite you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps sustain this work and allows these conversations to grow. Together we keep alive the hope that tomorrow can be brighter than today.